Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 12th District. We are just past the halfway point in the in-session series, and we'll have your legislators on just a little bit later in the program. But hot little report here, right in my hands. Economic and Revenue Update. That's the one we've been waiting for. This really drives the budget negotiations, which are happening right now in both transportation, capital, and the main budget. All of these are really driven by this report, which everybody has been waiting for. We have it. We'll review it. And we have a few other news stories, then we'll get right to your legislators and spend a little extra time on some of the things they're doing. And then next week, we will certainly have all the numbers for you as these budgets roll out. It's going to get very exciting over the next few weeks, or very depressing, depending on your point of view, I think. They are saying more taxes. We'll see. We'll be right back to tell you more about the economic and revenue forecast when we return to the 12th District. This is Kerry Condata for NCW Live. All right, welcome back to the 12th District. A few news points, a few bits of news before we get into the revenue report. I will break that down for you. But there's a few things we've been following. We're just going to touch on them. We will expand on these issues over the next few weeks. As we have talked about, the trade talks continue with China. This is one of the biggest news stories for us because of the export situation. As you'll see in the revenue report shortly, that the export situation is of concern moving forward as exports decline due to the Chinese trade situation. Those agreements are still in progress, but have been slowed down a bit. There was supposed to be a meeting in March. Now it looks like it's been moved out to April. That is a critical agreement for the folks here. We've been following Brexit. As you know, this week is the final number, the final date for Brexit. The British government has asked for an extension for 3 months. Of course, the Europeans have put some major pieces together, concessions, I would say would be the word, to get that 90-day extension. So we're not sure exactly what's going to happen with that. We'll know by next week. And of course, the wall continues to be the debate on immigration as the numbers continue to rise on people coming across the border illegally. There is getting to be a mass problem down there that needs to be rectified. A couple of the things that have happened this week is that the Supreme Court found that people can be held without bail and deported if they are considered criminals or illegal, have created some crime. That is a pretty big win for the Trump administration. And the military says they may have the money without shutting down any other projects. They may have some excess money that could help out to create at least some sort of a barrier, whether it's a wall or a fence or whatever. So we'll be following that again for the state of Washington, for the 12th District. The immigration debate is a big, big deal. And last but not least, for the state of Washington, a big deal is Boeing. The grounding of the 737 MAX is really creating some havoc. The airplanes are stacking up over on the runways in Renton where they are built. They are continuing production, but this problem could create a major problem for the revenue report, as we will also touch on. It looks to be at this point that there is at least some evidence that there is a software problem in one of the automatic pilot systems that actually controls the plane to some extent when it has a stall or potential stall position. It looks like all the things that I've read that there is some significant issues with that system, and they are trying to rectify those. Until then, the planes are grounded around the world, and the airlines are scampering to try to find other planes with lots of flights canceled, lots of routes changed, and I'm sure this is all going to fall back to Boeing somehow. So Boeing are one of our top companies in the state of Washington, certainly one of the big employers, is really in a tough position right now. Let's hope that it works out and that we don't have too much of an interruption in the situation. But on the other hand, we want those planes to be totally safe. Another note I want to mention before we go to the revenue forecast was a very interesting TV show put together, a news program put together by one of our station friends over in Seattle, Como, called Seattle is Dying. This has been a very controversial program because it actually does point out some of the things we've talked about here on the 12th District, how the city of Seattle is deteriorating to a point where it's not even safe to be on the streets. with their homeless situation, their crime situation, drug deals being made right in the streets in front of the cops. And they got to introduce, to talk to some of these police officers off record. And it's just shocking. So if you get a chance to see that, it's on Facebook. Eric Johnson did a bang-up job. Of course, the city is refuting all of it, saying it's safe, it's wonderful, it's terrific. No, it isn't. Seattle's in a very bad, deteriorating position, like Portland, like San Francisco, and like all areas that are governed by a progressive-style Democrat group. I'm sorry, that's just the way it's happening. All right, that revenue report, we promised to give you some numbers. It's pretty good, about $300 million up again, but there are some dark sides. Let's take a look and see. The U.S. labor market only added 20,000 net jobs in February. That was an unusual report because the labor market's been very strong, but then again, you don't ever look at 1 month because that can be a little bit of an anomaly. We think it's probably going to look better in March and April. U.S. consumer confidence, though, has reached its highest point in some years. It continues to climb. Even with all the issues we talk about, from Chinese trade and the grounding of the airplanes, the consumer confidence overall is extremely high. Seattle area consumer price inflation remains above national average, so even though Seattle's having lots of issues socially, from an economic standpoint, they're still moving fairly strongly. Washington exports declined in the fourth quarter. Not surprising. I suspect we'll see a large decrease in the first quarter as well, with Boeing not delivering any airplanes. That is a huge situation right now. Major general fund revenue collections for February through March came in at $91 million, above the November forecast, and again about $307 million total more dollars. This puts the legislature in a position to spend probably $5 billion more if they want to spend it all. I certainly don't recommend that, but $5 billion in additional budget could be spent. So we'll see next week. We'll get those numbers specifically and see what they do. But the rumor on the street is they're looking for more revenue and want to spend more like $7 or $8 billion more without increasing any money to education. That I want to hear more about. All right, we'll be right back with your legislators here at the 12th District, see what they're up to, and we'll get ready for next week, the big one, when we see the actual numbers and see how it's going to affect you directly. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our legislators back with us. We are past the halfway point in the session, and things are boiling down to budgets and revenue reports, and we're going to talk about both. Let's get these folks on board. Welcome. Welcome back. Now, this week might be a little bit less hectic than the last one with all those hours on the floor, but tell us a little bit about what you have been doing. I suspect you've been listening to Senate bills.
That's exactly right. We've now started the process basically over, as bills come to us now from the opposite chamber. We are hearing those bills in our committees, and then we'll ramp back up next week into sort of the same really hectic committee schedules that we had just before the cutoff.
And some of the things that are coming back to us, they've been modified, or well, we thought, in fact I did anyway, I thought some of the ideas that we sent over to them were quite fine, and now they're going to be modifying those when it gets over to them. So I would be curious to see where some of these bills end up after they get their amendments attached and everything is deliberated. We've also been busy with some local issues. It's interesting how we get right down to the end, or when I say to the end, where the budgets are about to be released, and we've had some other things surface. Different interests have expressed concern and needing funding, and so that's been filling up some of that time also.
Sure, yeah, I'm sure you're getting some constituent visits now as we get down to the end. People are in a little bit of a panic to get their package or program done. Speaking of which, capital budget is coming out Monday, and also, or it will be out, and the actual budget will be out. But let's talk about capital for a minute, Mike. Any surprises there?
Well, we've done obviously quite well in the capital budget for our district. We've got lots of good community projects in there that I'm really excited about. We've got some more work to do as we head over into the Senate. So, no one panic. This is all the start of the negotiations now with the Senate. We have our own final negotiations tonight on that capital budget. So it's just going to be, we've got good projects in there. We've got to go and buy some more projects in the Senate. So it's been a negotiation that's lasted for months, and I'm pretty happy with the final result and the projects that we're going to get for the 12th legislative district.
All right, then we move over to the transportation budget. Keith, you're involved in that, kind of indirectly on the committee, but what do you see coming out of transportation, and when will that be released?
Well, it'll be released on Monday. We'll have about 48 hours to look it over and make any types of comments. I hesitate to say any kind of amendments because I doubt that there'll be much movement at all. But what's happened in these last few days, we've all been, I think all of us anyway, that have submitted transportation requests. We've had an opportunity to once again, reiterate our priorities. We were told pretty bluntly that there wasn't near enough money to fund what the requests were, and so don't expect much. But I'm hopeful that we will see some funding coming our way. I think the things that I submitted were that they are priorities for the region, and they really do need to have some additional help in order for these things to actually take place.
So do you think you'll see a 6-cent tax increase regardless of the carbon tax, or do you see both of them at this point?
Well, that'll be an interesting discussion because once we get on the floor and we talk things through, there may be, and I don't even know, what their appetite will be for the debate because when we really start zeroing in on the benefit of the expenditures that they're proposing, I mean, that to me is the critical thing, is what kind of return are you going to be receiving on your investment? And if we're just going to feel good about things and pay more to feel good, then I'm not sure that that's really where the taxpayers want to be, and the people that will be consuming gas. I mean, we have to consider the bigger impact for the economy, transport of goods, and whatever things that we have to use our roads for to get get from one place to another. I mean, it isn't so easy to just say, well, let's all just chip in a little bit more, because it's one thing to be a residential type customer, a passenger car, and it's quite another to have your businesses relying on that fuel supply being affordable.
Well, yeah, I think the point there is that it ripples through the entire economy, and this is not just about a few more cents on the gas tax. It really does affect a lot of folks, and especially out here in the rural communities and all the shipping. And we've enjoyed some very low gas prices recently. I suspect that won't stay forever either. So you have to look at that going forward. Mike, you had an interesting comment on education funding. Tell us about what's going on over there in education. This is a little bit surprising from the Democrat side.
Yeah, it's been challenging because we're not going to see these budgets until Monday, and so we've had very little input, if any, on our side into those budgets. So operating as is going to be released on Monday, and of course I'm focused on what are we going to do for education, because I've been trying to offer up some solutions around things like SEB and their conversations around PEB, and then special education. I want to see some funding for that. But I'm hearing, and again, we'll confirm on Monday, but I'm hearing there isn't a whole lot of appetite from the budget writers to put any more dollars into education. There may be some small tweaks, but it's not going to be, it's going to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, not in the millions of dollars.
Well, that is certainly surprising based on some of the early comments we had. Well, in my hot little hands right here, I have the news of the week, which is the economic and revenue update that you guys got to look at. And so I'd like each of your comments on this revenue update and how you think this affects the budget negotiations and the final budget.
Well, again, I think, I was pleased to see positive economic numbers. We keep in mind we were in a really good place even before we started session as far as available revenues to spend, because we came into session with a strong economy. This updated revenue forecast indicates that we still have a strong economy. I can tell you that I don't think a positive economic revenue forecast is going to have really any burden or any bearing rather on how much we're going to spend. I mean, I think spending is going to be increased no matter what. We could have the most glowing forecast and spending is going to go up. So I'm being told that we may increase spending between 7 and 9 billion. So it's a lot of money we're talking about.
And when you do make those commitments, and unless it's a one-time expenditure, you will have that you have to be able to sustain the commitments that you make. So whether we're talking about salaries, or we're talking about programs, or we're talking about anything that has, legs to it as far as going into the future, you have to be sure that you're going to have an adequate income stream that will fund these projects and services. I think we're talking that we may end up with around a 5% reserve. And, with the size of the budget that we're looking at, it wouldn't take much for that to be gone. But it is important for me, from my perspective, and when you're building a budget, is to make sure that you do have reserves, you haven't spent everything. Because, if you do have to come back later and start making cuts, that's a lot more difficult than making sure that you've had a sustainable government that provides the services that the citizens need.
And I think that sustainability piece is really important because, well, if we were to adopt the spending increases that are proposed in the governor's budget, we will have increased state spending since 2011 from between 75 and 85%. 75 to 85% since 2011. That's a staggering number.
Well, it is when you consider it took 120 some years to get to that level, and then suddenly it doubles in just 10 years or less. Notice in the economic revenue report, there is some indication of some slowdowns too. Of course, with exports, we expect that with the Chinese trade agreements. But there's also some other areas that show possible weakness, and that is certainly a concern moving forward. How has the Boeing thing affected things down there? It's kind of off the cuff, but I know that's a big deal, and that combined with the Chinese trade negotiations is really a problem, I think.
Well, I'm seeing it reflected in interest rates and around the capital budget and bonds. So that has me a little concerned. We're getting pinched there a little bit. And so I am watching that carefully to make sure to see how we need to adjust for those changes in the interest rates.
Yeah.
But from the standpoint of Boeing, my understanding based on conversations I had last night is, the production is still continuing. They're anticipating being able to, deliver the planes. Right now they're just, keeping them, at the plant, but it definitely will have an impact if they run into a major hiccup in that production of the 737.
Well, I think the point here is that there is some unknowns, and to go out and spend that kind of money is just kind of ludicrous at this point. And given if they're not doing education, Mike, good heavens, where's all this $6 and $7 billion going? I just can't imagine.
Well, we'll see it. Again, we've said all along, I think that the priorities of the government right now are mental and behavioral health, and we're spending a significant amount of money in those areas. We could fund that area entirely without raising any new taxes, and we saw those analysis done all the way throughout our capital budget negotiations, all the way throughout our presentations and appropriations. So it is a bit. Again, it's a bit odd to be here waiting to see where that kind of money is going to be spent. We'll know Monday.
Yeah, we'll cover that next week. We'll be talking to you guys, and you'll have information on all three of these budgets actually on paper, which will certainly make it easier to talk about. On a personal note for each of you, you both got a couple of bills, I think, floating out there. Keith, I was a little surprised to see some pushback. Well, maybe I wasn't. From Senator Hobbs on the continuing the fuel tax stickers, something that I started and you graciously continued. But he is not so hot on the idea. Do you know why? Has he told us why he doesn't want to move that? It's been very successful.
Well, the conversation that I had, I did hear that they were concerned about it being there in perpetuity. But for me, to disclose how much tax is being paid on a transaction is there on everything else that we buy. So I don't see that as being an issue. But I'm not sure. He didn't really say, other than he wasn't real keen on it. But after I talked with him, he said, well, maybe we'll give you a hearing. So hopefully we'll be able to move it through.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it's a good program. I know he's probably concerned when that extra 6 cents or 9 cents or whatever you guys negotiate comes on there. But it'd also be a little awkward if they had to take those off when they change that tax. They either got to change them or they got to remove them. I think that'd be pretty awkward. Mike, you've got anything floating out there to talk about on your personal legislation?
Yeah, I've got several bills. I actually had breakfast this morning with about 12 other legislators and the governor on some legislation around career-connected learning and CTE course equivalencies that I've been pushing. And we talked all about how that bill will really create some easier access to some course equivalencies around career and technical education. And as you know, Carrie, from your time with me here in the House, one of my big priorities is figuring out how we provide additional pathways for these students that may not be just a four-year degree, but focus on apprenticeships, focus on the skills, trades, and those sorts of things, and how we can get kids excited about those very real careers, those very real professions that are going to provide living wage jobs in the future. So that's a big passion of mine. I've got some housing bills that are still alive. And I've got the recorking bill that's still out there.
All right.
So.
That'll be interesting. Well, listen, anything else you want to put in the end here before we go? We're just running out of time, but I'm looking forward to next week and seeing all these budgets on paper, see where we're at, see how much they're really going to spend. It's just shocking. But anything before we go?
Tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, we will be at Wenatchee Valley College at the Grove. We'll have our town hall meeting.
And actually, I hate to tell you, but that's after this or before this show airs. So you guys already have done that. We'll be talking about that next week too, and I'll certainly be there or would have been there as the case may be. Mike?
Yeah, I appreciate all the folks that have been coming over very steadily over the last couple of weeks, as Keith said, to try and help us negotiate the last minute things into these budgets. Again, when these budgets are released, keep in mind that these are just the beginnings of the negotiations now with the Senate, and there's a whole lot of movement to be had between now and then.
All right. Well, I appreciate the update. We'll really look forward to next week digging into the real numbers. I did cover the revenue update in detail, but there is some concerns there, and I just can't wait to see these numbers. So thanks for being with us and taking the time. Enjoy a little bit of breather here, because I think it's going to get very hot and heavy in the next few weeks. And you got some heavy lifting to do, guys. Keep up the good work.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Carrie.
Okay, we'll see you soon. All right, your legislators right in the middle of the session or slightly past the middle. They are just about ready to unleash those budgets, and we will have those next week for you in detail and see just how much they're really going to spend on this budget. Could they really increase the budget by 80+% over just 7 or 8 years? I mean, I think that's asking for big, big problems, big trouble going forward. So we'll know next week. We'll be right back to wrap it up here on the 12th District. Welcome back to the 12th District in session. Well, we're about a little past the halfway point in that session, and next week's a big week because all the budgets will drop. The initial budgets are coming from the House. There'll be a response from the Senate. Of course, we've already seen the governor's budget, and we'll get to see exactly what this is going to look like, how much they're going to spend, how many new taxes will be involved that could affect you, how much gas tax, is there a carbon tax? These are questions we're going to answer in the next couple of weeks. I hope you stick with us. Don't forget to watch our evening news at 5, 6, and 10 on NCW Life for all the local stories. And we will be back with you next week with all those numbers and more, and an update on the Boeing situation as well. We hope that gets rectified sooner than later. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, you can go on demand at any time and see these shows back as far as you want to go back. There's some great subject matter. Go to ncwlife.com programs and go on demand with the 12th District. This is Kerry Condata. We'll look forward to giving you those numbers next week.